Look, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Content is king. So if you have some content you need created, hit up iopvideo.com. Video production, podcasting, you name it, we can do it. iopvideo.com. We make things look pretty.
Voice Party, everybody! Woo! Woo! It's the Voice Party. It's that time once again. We got a very special episode for you. We're doing another review. We reviewing the sci-fi cult classic Dark City from the 1990s. This was during Jennifer Connelly's rebirth when she was doing Requiem for a Dream. Kind of reinvent her career.
Donald Trump wrong.
Not quite, yeah.
We're not doing Dark City? What are we doing?
Fear
It's a docu-series on Netflix called Fear City.
I haven't seen that. So
You did the wrong homework.
Nah, you're turning into Gaspar. What the fuck?
No, see, Phil's the engineer.
So take it away, Joaquin.
Yes.
All right, so before the wonderful parody of an intro done by our brilliant engineer, Phil Sprinter, and I mean, like, the man is 9 times Geordie LaForge or Data on anybody's engineering deck. I swear to Bob. We're reviewing the docu-series Fear City, and
it's
it's
crazy
a Netflix.
Because, we just reviewed Gotti, and you and I, Joaquin, were talking about this. So this is kind of how it came up. Go ahead, take it away. Sorry, I just wanted to include that.
Well, it's crazy because we were talking about how we had seen Gotti in the chat, and then you were like, yo, check this out. And then I kind of figured you were like, check, it was before we were going to review Gotti when you suggested Fear City. And I said to myself, I bet you he's thinking this will be great supplemental material to add to our Gotti discussion. But I was, after I got done watching Fear City, I was like, well, you know what? Like, for one thing, Gotti doesn't appear very much in Fear City. And then, like, if we're not careful, our review of Gotti could have easily turned into a history of the mafia in general, which would have taken away from, like, the film review within itself. But I was like, this docuseries on its own merits is actually pretty interesting, well shot, and it tells a very unique story. That's what I was thinking. So I was like, we should just do this docuseries by itself. We're about to have a mob month or something. I don't know.
It's interesting because this is just season 1, and based on we just watched. You guys watched Gotti recently. Season 1 of this show, it's kind of the prequel to what Gotti essentially was. The prequel to Gotti, because I think season 2 of Fear City is going to be the Gotti side of the story. One of the reasons I thought this was interesting,
He took him down.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I think this is all relevant right now. Of course, I mean, you guys saw Fear City, you saw clips of your president talking, and he dealt with the mob. They're saying that he wasn't directly, connected with him, but any builder in New York in the 70s and the 80s, you had to work with them. Like, there was no way around it. They controlled the unions, as we see in the and so, like, he had to deal with them. I mean, that's one of the connections to now is Donald Trump. The whole RICO thing, which to me is interesting because it makes sense. They recently used the RICO laws on what's his name, Tekashi 6ix9ine. That's how they got his ass to flip. And then, like we were talking about in this recent review that we did, how the Genovese mob guy just died recently, which kind of lets you know that they're still working, they're still alive, and it's crazy how much influence these motherfuckers had, man. What are your initial thoughts on watching Fear City, like from episode 1, where they talk about how how much power they had in New York City?
Oh my gosh. Like, I had read up on the history of the mob as a kid.
Yeah.
Well, high school,
It's interesting.
and into my young adulthood. And I gotta say, it's really a trip to see just how powerful they really were. Like, they had their fingers and toes into every industry across this country.
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
It's
yeah.
nuts.
It's funny because like when we were doing the Gotti review and Gaspar, you said that you had only really known about mob stuff through the movies, right?
Yeah.
You didn't really know much about mob, and I mean, it's not that I like glorifying it or anything. It's just interesting because in New York, for example, after watching this documentary, I mean, and many documentaries that I've watched on the mob, they're connected in like almost every fabric of society. It was gambling, because one of the things that you said is how do they make money, and like with Pablo Escobar, what the hell he did to make money, but these guys, I mean, they were supposedly not dealing with drugs, but some of them dealt with drugs. They the gambling, illegal gambling. Some of them own legitimate casinos, unions. They controlled all the unions, the restaurant unions, the construction. And this is an interesting thing that I've heard about the mob. So apparently, back in the days, like in any other state, a sack of concrete would cost you 80 cents. 80 cents. It's just an example. 80 cents. Anywhere else in the country, a sack of concrete. In New York, it was $2.80. Those $2 went to the mob. That was their tax. So think of construction. Yeah, think of construction, like how much they're using concrete to make, and in the 70s and the 80s, the construction was boom. Like you see in this documentary, they talk about construction was booming, and our president was working extensively with these guys to get some of his buildings made, and it's just crazy. Like every time there's construction, they're getting money.
It seems like you had no choice, though.
Yeah, no, right. That's what I'm saying. Like
you got your fingers in the unions, and all you got to say is, "Look, if you don't give me like $20,000, we may have a picket fence on this property here."
Yep. And what's crazy? That's what I'm saying. Like,
a picket line, not a picket fence.
What's crazy to me is it's all like you're just sitting back collecting money because you got to kill one or two guys to make your point, and that is gonna the fear is gonna ripple through to everyone else, and like, okay, let's work, otherwise we're gonna fly out of the building. Like you see in the first episode, they showed that a foreman was pushed out of the 17th floor of a building.
Yeah.
That's fucking insane, dude. I personally would just quit. I would fucking quit. I don't know, man.
Like if that bit where they catch that conversation where they're like, if it gets anywhere over like, what was it, 500,000 or a million, if it gets crazy, you call me before you.
What was that exactly?
1.5 million.
1.5 million to 2 million. What was that exactly? Because I kind of.
So what it is let's say
it was a construction contract.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
They were saying if you do a bid, if the company was gonna do a bid for a contract, and it got over 1.5 million, then before they do the bid, they should like talk to the mobster basically.
Yeah, but it was the main guys, the top bosses
crazy.
That were gonna get the
come to me to let me know how much extra I could take off you.
It was the main guys were gonna take the job. And
I want to know what that one foreman got beat up for. Like, why was he beat up and thrown out of I don't know how many stories, but he was thrown out of the top of a building. Like, what did he say? What did he do to offend the mob elite? Like, you go in to do your job and they beat you up and they throw you out of Like, seriously?
Yeah, especially a foreman. I mean, I can understand the owners of the company, you know, because that's what they did. They went and intimidated the owners. That's what specifically, since we just reviewed it, Sammy the Bull did. Sammy the Bull, shit. I wouldn't be surprised if the guy who pushed the foreman out of the building was Sammy the Bull, because he was one of the people to be involved with construction. I guess there was a point in this interview he recently had earlier this year. He said that there was at one point no building in New York City was built without him knowing about it or connected to it in some way, and that's that says a lot. So, I don't know that's the thing that's scary, because if you watch this documentary from the very beginning, the opening scene, they have a recording playing where this guy says, whoever he's talking to, if you don't bring my $200, like, these dudes were making millions off of each contract from each building, and like you hear someone threatening someone else's life over $200.
But see, that's how they got their millions. Well, you start off small, we don't know who. The thing is too. So everybody got to start somewhere. And like, honestly, I don't even think that was like one of the big bosses. I think that was like probably one of the low run street guys they were bugging, and he was just like talking to some bookie that owed him money.
Yeah. Right. Cause
that's the only explanation that makes sense to me. It had to have been like somebody low on the totem pole.
Some fucking broke motherfucker who's like just using his friend's name. Like, hey, you know who my friend is? Sammy Gravano, motherfucker. Give me my fucking cheeseburgers.
Because you got to think about it, man. The way I figure it is, the top guys, the bosses and the underbosses and maybe like the capos are probably pulling in millions, but all those captains and street soldiers, I doubt they're getting healthy cuts from all that,
Not necessarily, man, because I don't know if you remember what they were talking about. Okay, for example, John Gotti. They talked about him a lot in this documentary, but he wasn't I like that he wasn't the main focus. They mentioned his right-hand man, which they portrayed him in the film, Angelo Ruggiero. He was like a millionaire heroin dealer. And like,
here's the thing.
That was his guy. Like, that wasn't even the top dog. He was just his soldier,
Here's the thing, though. Angelo was a billionaire because he had a side hustle. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's like saying,
okay, I hear what you're saying.
And this is what I mean. Officially in La Cosa Nostra, they're not allowed at this point in time, the documentary is covering anyway, officially, to deal in drugs. As a matter of fact, as they covered in the movie we reviewed, Gotti's particular crew was about to get iced because Paul Castellano had gotten they're dealing drugs. Well, according to the rules, we gotta ice these guys, all these guys.
Right.
So like. And there's hypocrisy with that, because the older guys, had the opportunity to make money from prohibition. Right. Like, that's where the old mob money comes from. Like, and essentially selling alcohol that is illegal at an exorbitant amount of money because of its illegal status, to me, isn't too different than selling illegal narcotics.
No.
It's different, but it's similar, because you have an opportunity to charge more than you would if a product was legal. You're charging more because it's illegal. So, well, look, I get in trouble if I am caught selling this to you, so it's going to cost you like extra or whatever, and then you get to charge it, and then it's super popular, and then human psychology suggests that because something is forbidden, it entices a good chunk of the population just to get it because they're not supposed to have it. You know what I mean? Same thing with prohibition. I think they say alcoholism actually went up higher than it ever been because of prohibition.
Right.
People were drinking in excess that never drank before because like it was something. It was like, ooh, this is risky. We're gonna go.
Yeah, there's always that thing where if you tell them not to do it, they're gonna do it. The hot stove thing, where don't touch the stove, it's hot,
Yep.
and you still touch it,
Yeah, but I mean, and yes, it's true. Narcotics. I'm not saying that narcotics are just are
Healthier
not
than
worse
alcohol.
than alcohol
Right.
because they definitely, some of them are, like heroin, crack. You know what I mean? They're
Yeah.
far worse than alcohol. But I can see why some of the younger gangsters are like, it's easy for you to sit on your throne, stuffing yourself with meatballs and spaghetti, while the rest of us, who made your money during the heyday when it was easier to make it, like in a morally, quote, air quotes, way, but we haven't
Honorable, like
made
a more
anything yet.
honorable way. Yeah.
There you go, honorable,
Yeah.
in an honorable way. But we don't have the opportunity to make the same kind of money you guys did. We're out here on the streets, we're hustling, we're stealing boatloads of guns and selling them on the black market. We're robbing banks or whatever we have to do to get over.
Yeah.
And we're still not making that much. So they're doing it under the table. And that's the only reason why I say, well, the street guys probably weren't making the same amount of money under official means. Like if they're actually following the La Costa Nostra rules, they're probably not bringing home that much, the lower guys.
And
I would imagine.
Another reason too, I would say, like on well, it kind of goes hand in hand together with your reasoning. They also, like those young soldiers, as they were called. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the other documentary called Cocaine Cowboys. It's based on the Pablo Escobar and his whole crew. And you have? Okay,
No, I have not.
No, I haven't.
Yeah,
Go on.
okay, that's another fucking good documentary. But anyways, these guys, a lot of the Colombians and the Cubans and the Puerto Ricans, a lot of Latino gangs, Latino criminals were making a huge. They were making millions in the streets of New York at the same time that this what they're talking about with cocaine in the 80s and the 70s. It was like everybody was doing it. Quaaludes, all that shit, like everybody was doing it. So I think these guys, these wise guys, they saw like what the Colombians and the Cubans were making, and they're like, fuck, we can't let, it's like it was too easy to make money back then off of that shit. So it's just like it would have been stupid to not get involved with that, especially.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I want to attribute it to, because a lot of these guys are like, if you hear what the interview, they're kind of racist. So it's like there's no way in hell they're gonna see colored people making more money than they are, And when it comes to drugs, that whole race shit goes out the window, because like the Aryan Brotherhood, who are racist, they'll fucking sell drugs to black people and they'll buy it from Mexicans. Like when it comes to drugs, there's no fucking whatever. Money's money, And
Of course they'll sell it.
exactly.
Of course they'll sell it to black people. Why wouldn't they want to sell something that would potentially ruin their lives?
But what I'm saying is like, and I here's an example. Long time ago, back when weed was illegal, I worked somewhere where the coworkers wanted to smoke. They go out of their way and find out who had it. This is before, this is when you needed a cannabis card. So I actually saw the opportunity in that, and I was like, all right, well, I could get it for you. I know where to go. And I started doing a lot of that with my coworkers. Like, I don't want to go out and find it. So I can see that with the wise guys, a lot of the people they dealt with who wanted it, they don't want to go to those part of town. Like, I'll go. You're gonna pay me for it, and you get to make your price at that point when you're going out of your way to get it for somebody who wouldn't go into that part of town. That's what I'm saying. Like, I can see how that, what a Colombian would get for $100, one of these wise guys charge another Italian, 200, 300 for, you know,
Yeah.
that's where it's like opportunity, man. When you see someone wants it, but they can't get to it, and you know, you'll go any part of town, like shit. Yeah, it only makes sense. Like I you know, obviously it's when it comes to like the whole hypocrisy thing, because like John Gotti was gonna get probably whacked for dealing drugs, but yet his boss was taking money from another guy in his crew who was dealing drugs also. So
Now, here's the question. Is Paul Castellano aware of that? Like, did he know? You know, because I mean, Gotti was an earner too. He was giving them money too. So the question is like, did he know? Is it just that John and Angie got caught?
according to so I don't know if you guys saw that documentary I sent you a few days ago. It's a really older, it's an older
The Fox one? Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw it.
Okay, where they had Dominic Montiglio, who was the nephew of Nino Gaggi. I remember that part.
Yeah.
There was this like unspoken bond between the Westies, the Irish mob, and Paul Castellano. I don't know if you remember that scene.
I remember that whole bit about the Westies. I was kind of,
They're scary fucking dudes.
they are.
They fucking chop people up and fucking yeah. Well, those guys,
they're monsters.
Yeah, they didn't have those rules. They weren't wise guys, and they dealt drugs. They did sell drugs. They were drug dealers. You know, they were connected.
They had grandmothers pull in carts of drugs, and you know, with their hair. And that was crazy.
That's smart. That's smart. Who's gonna pull over a grandma?
It's very smart. I mean, they will now after they hear our review, but
right, yeah, exactly, yeah, because fucking law enforcers are listening to it. No, but yeah, so those guys were connected, and I don't know if you remember the scene where Paul Castellano actually sat and talked to the guys. So it's kind of like, okay, you know, we can't sell drugs, but you guys sell drugs, and we can be connected with you, and blah blah blah. It's a smart way of saying I don't sell drugs, but I tax a motherfucker for selling drugs.
right. But the only problem is that the Westies were also drug addicts themselves, which
is horrible.
which is something that's which is terrible because it's you can't. The saying goes, if you can't really go into business with a drug addict.
Oh no, that's what I got from watching that. Like that, supposedly, I don't know. Well, you remember there was like they were saying there was a couple of things that guy Paul Castellano did that because his brother-in-law was the Gambino, which is the guy, you know, that's what they call the Gambinos, Carlo Gambino, and he was strict about drugs, as you saw in the Gotti movie. You know, he talked to Gotti like, "Hey, you're not dealing drugs, are you?" And he pulls him in to talk in his ear. And like this guy's over here working with these drug addicts who, if you remember, according to the guy they were interviewing, the Featherwood guy, the Westies guy who ratted on the boss, he said they would get so high they don't even remember who they killed. Like, what? Yeah.
I mean, you know, he sounded like him and the other Italian, the guy whose son almost killed himself. They seemed to be the most remorseful.
Yeah.
You know, like the first guy admitted that maybe he was a little naive in going to watch The Godfather and being like, yo, I miss home. And then coming back home and realizing like, it ain't as cool as I thought it was. But I really feel like the dude from the Westies, especially when he talks about his daughters finding out what a piece of garbage he was.
Yeah.
Like, he was, that hurt, I think.
Yeah. And well, his son, it was his nephew that you're talking about, the Philly mob guy, the one that didn't show his face. I know we're talking about a completely different documentary now, but
guys.
It's what it is crazy is it all ties together in a way, because you know it's multiple sides. This is why I'm very interested in this, because there's so many different sides, and they're all kind of tied to these big events, and it all makes sense when you watch all this shit, which I'll get into right now. But yes. That guy, Phil Leonetti, who was connected to the Philly mob, whose uncle and boss was the famous Nicky Scarfo, who who was like this little guy who had a Napoleon complex, and he killed a lot of people. He was like one of the craziest mob bosses. He had this guy brainwashed. That's why. Just to touch on what you were saying, he had him brainwashed where he thought from a very young age, just like Dominic and Nino Gaggi, they were brought up, they were raised by mob guys, and they were brainwashing into thinking like, you gotta kill this. Like if you don't kill this guy, he's gonna kill the whole family. When in reality, it was just a guy who they wanted to rip off. But that's, it's easy to be brainwashed if you're raised a certain way.
I think the most heartbreaking thing was when this kid tells his dad that he's going to be class president, and he explains that part of being class president is you monitor the class and you take down names of students who are misbehaving.
Yeah, that was.
And then the dad just goes, so it sounds like to me like they're teaching you to be a stool pigeon.
Yeah.
You can't have stool pigeons in this family. You need to go to teach right now and tell me you can't be class president. I'm like, that is so, like, little achievements like that for kids, even though they're honorific titles with like even the most menial and minuscule of responsibilities, are the kind of things that boost their confidence so they will run for governor someday. That's jacked up.
Yeah, that was heartbreaking. And it wasn't his dad, it was his godfather, but that makes it even scarier because I don't know if you remember where he said his godfather Nino Gaggi, who was a horrible person, scared off his real dad from coming near him. Wow. But again, that's a whole other documentary. But what I wanted to touch on, so this documentary Fear City, they touched on that there was the five families of the mob, and what they, what's his name? Rudy Giuliani. Did you guys?
Okay. Yeah. Back up for a sec. I have to say before we get too deep into this documentary, the thing that I feel that is special about this series, is that in most mob documentaries, you have like either an omniscient narrator, like a la Ken Burns style, going over the points of interesting history of the mafia, or you have varying interviews. But the thing that ties, but it's usually focused on the mob from like a mob's perspective. The thing that makes Fear City stand out to me is that it's almost completely told, predominantly told from the perspective of law enforcement.
Right.
And framed through these tapes. They're showing like reenactments of federal agents listening to the tapes. You actually kind of get to see things from the viewpoint of the law enforcement officers in a way that you normally don't.
Right.
And that's something that I loved about it, was to see that other side. And when I say law enforcement officers, I'm not talking about the boys in blue,
like the Pete Walkers,
Black Lives Matter. I mean the feds.
Yes.
And I will say this: I think modern day feds, tacticians. I think the modern day feds are probably the best example. Like when I say modern day, I mean like from like the 80s, like late 80s on up to like now, are probably the best example of what moral policing is supposed to be. Like the feds are the ones that put out the research warning people, hey, we think that the Klan is going to start infiltrating, or has started infiltrating, police force across the nation. And well, lo and behold, 2020, and they're still killing off unarmed black folks. So shout out to the feds, yo.
I would dispute that, because I mean, yes, there are a lot of those people that are working in, the FBI and the CIA that I believe have well intentions. I mean, I don't know people per se, but I know, well, actually, that's a whole other story. I have met some. also that the Ku Klux Klan. Well, not it was him. He had a guy.
Which one?
Have you guys seen that movie at all?
I haven't.
Black
Oh,
Klansman.
wait,
Black Klansman.
yeah. I saw that. Spike Lee's great.
Lee's. Okay. Well, I don't know if you watched any of the interviews with the real officer who pulled off that operation. He was asked by one of the big agencies to destroy his evidence down with the about the KKK being involved directly in a lot of law enforcement.
That was in the 70s.
That's just an example.
That's why I specifically said
Right,
80s and on up.
But that's
because the FBI used to be super shady back in the day. Like J. Edgar Hoover was a dick.
Monster. They called him the American Himmler, which is a very good description of him. But going back to what you said, that is one of the things that I appreciated about this was, one, they not only did they use the law enforcement's, like you said, point of view, but they had the guys who were directly, like, they didn't just interview the guy who was in charge of the operation. They interviewed the guys who literally went in to bug the mob.
Yes.
And that's something I don't think I've ever seen before, other than the interview with Donnie Brasco, the real Donnie Brasco, which I don't think they touched on it, but they did talk about they had informants, which they talked about in the film. They didn't specifically, so that just Donnie Brasco was just one of them, because they probably had multiple guys like that in the organizations. Another thing I wanted to say is what was cool about this. I guess if you were someone who watched The Godfather in 1972, and they kind of talked about the five families, and they wrote about that in books, and in a way it was still kind of a conspiracy, because I don't know if you guys follow, for example, the Colombo is one of the mob families, and that's talked about here. Joe Colombo, the real Joe Colombo, he was he picketed the FBI because he was saying that they were being what was the word, discriminating the Italian Americans. So he kind of played, in the public's image, the face of a honest man who was being targeted unjustly by the FBI. In reality, he was a mob boss. But that he denounced that there was such a thing as the five families. Like, there's no fucking way. So all along, that whole five families was a conspiracy. Godfathers. And then when this investigation that Rudy Giuliani, what was the year? 86, 84?
Yeah, I'm there.
You guys
I think it was 84.
84. Then it comes out that there is such a thing as the five families. That there is that it's real. It's not just a movie thing. Like there's recordings that
it's like there's proof now.
Yeah, like UFOs exist, guys. We have one.
No, I think if you grew up in New York during the time when the mob was around, or any city where the mob was active, you knew. It just wasn't.
But it wasn't.
It just wasn't.
Yeah.
And the news reports. You look at like the old news reports in these documentaries, and they say this mob boss got killed.
Right.
So it's not like people. And you look at old newspapers from in the 40s.
Yeah.
They would say gangland murders. So it's not that no one knew. It's just that no law enforcement could legally prove it until RICO came out.
And also the thing is, you only really heard about it like when they had the people testify. I don't know if you've seen old footage of like the guy who was the leader of the Genovese. They asked him, are you the leader? Like, no, I'm a tax-paying American. They all denounced it. And the only time you heard about it was when they actually had someone on trial. So it's just like, they were quick to, because they had. I mean, that's the thing. They had influence over journalists and newspapers too. So they would just put out, "Oh, he's just saying this to save his ass," you know. And it,
Yeah, they had judges in their back pocket.
fuck, yeah, that's yeah. So saying is this thing, this whole indictment just straight up threw it out there that yes, it's true. And for me as a watcher, it was interesting, even though I already knew about the five families and I knew who they were, because if you grew up watching mob movies like I did, um, for example, you know, Goodfellas was about a crime family that was involved with the Lucchese crime family. Big Paulie was a captain for the Lucchese's, and I believe from what I watched in the interview, the guy in Goodfellas who Jimmy Burke, who what's his name, Robert De Niro portrayed in Goodfellas, he was like a member of the Westies. Also, Don was based on the Bonanno crime family. The Iceman was connected to the, which we watched a lot of that. Was connected to the Gambinos, and the Genovese guy was friends with the guy who directed The Exorcist, and he let him use one of his clubs to film a movie with Pacino. So it's like, I don't know, just as someone who likes good stories, it's like, even though it's horrible stories, people died. It's interesting that all these stories have a foundation, which is the five families, and that's one of the things that I appreciated about this, because, like, what are the stories we don't know?
I mean, in the five families, it's interesting how, the five families are the five families because they are, the largest. They make the most money, but when you think about like how many of the smaller families there are, like Buffalo, New York, Boston, like, even though Boston's mostly Irish mob territory,
but there's a lot of,
from what I understand, the Irish mob has never really been as organized as the Italians. Like, they've mostly been like small gangs, going back, stretching all the way back to like the 20s and on up to like Whitey Bulger. They've all just sort of operated like lone wolf outfits. And,
right.
The Italians, the Russians, yeah. Like the Italians, the Russians, so the triads, the
Yakuzas,
the Yakuzas, and the former KGB seem to be like the longest running and most organized of everybody, really. I mean, motorcycle gangs, yeah, shout out to them, but I don't know if they quite have the same level of like
right
influence and what have you as the gangs I just listed.
Yeah.
Because even the Jewish mob wasn't even,
the Jewish were actually pretty fucking powerful, especially when you talk about I don't know if you guys follow this Meyer Lansky, who was connected with the Italians, but he was like one of the leaders of the Jewish mob.
That was the guy that was down in Cuba too, right?
The things that I've read, he was single-handedly like picked presidents at one point, like to run, like according to he supposedly put Nixon in power because he did a lot of things for him that he wanted done, and he's probably one of the most, especially at that time. I believe they said his net worth was at 500 million or maybe even $1 billion, and back then, this is back in the 40s, started in the 20s. Like in the 20s he started coming up. That fucking is a lot of money for back in those days.
Yeah, I mean, Meyer was one guy, but like right. The five families.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I mean, I'm not saying he didn't have a crew, but I mean, like the five families were the five families.
Yeah.
And then all those offshoots across the nation. But anyway,
and
back to this
real quick, just because you touched on the smaller. I don't know if you guys have seen you guys did mention you saw The Irishman, right? Where the character Joe Pesci plays, Russell Buffalino, where he wanted to assassinate at someone using the hitman he was trying to contract to pull off was for a mob boss who lived in Walnut Creek, California. They I don't know if you remember that scene. So like,
Yeah, I remember that scene.
it's crazy when I heard that scene because someone I knew who was very involved in drug dealing, that there was a lot of mafia guys in Walnut Creek and what's that other city near Walnut Creek? Actually, Lafayette. There's a lot of mob guys there, and also San Rafael and Tiburon, which that's where all rich people live. And I was like, nah, I think that's only in New York. And when I saw that scene, I was like, oh shit, maybe.
Yeah, no, it's not only in New York, dude. They were everywhere at one point. They had them in Louisiana. They had them in Canada. Like
Kansas
you couldn't
City.
escape.
Chicago's one of the most powerful ones.
Oh yeah. Chicago is one of the big ones.
And then
I think they had a small presence in San Francisco at one point. Had to have had something.
In LA is their biggest one in California. The Los Angeles mob was their biggest one in California. But yeah, I looked at the map and it's crazy because I just started watching this stuff again recently. You brought it up in the last podcast we did. The guy that died, who ended up being he was the leader for the Genovese family, and that just like there's always going to be a mob. Like I don't think we can get away from that. Back then they probably they did loan shark like they talk about in the documentary. They loan shark, and now it's probably just the hidden charges on our bills that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that it's getting harder for them to operate. As law enforcement, as technology becomes more advanced and law enforcement becomes more efficient, I think it's kind of getting real hard for them to do what they want to do. And that's not exactly a problem.
No, not. Well, that's the thing that like when people glorify the mob, where a perfect example of this was there's an interview. They do talk about how we only killed ourselves. They only killed, themselves. Where this interview with Henry Hill, which we talked about him in the last, he's the guy who Ray Liotta portrayed in the Goodfellas. They asked him, because why did he testify against his friends? And he said because he was an addict and they were bringing him in for questioning. Of course, that's already. As soon as you're an addict and you're being brought in for questioning, it's easy for them to you're it's better off that you just they kill you because you're gonna start talking. Like, hey, tell us who's in charge and we'll give you some coke. Like after a few hours, you're gonna be begging for that shit. So, and that's what they do. That's what they always. Have you noticed a lot of these indictments that they get, or whenever they get somebody to testify against them, it's always the crackhead or the drug addict who fucking like, he's the one. So, and then in this interview, they asked Henry Hill, because those were his friends from when he was a kid. So why did he testify against them? He said, well, because if I didn't testify and get in the what's it called, the protective, what was it called, protective custody,
witness protection,
they would have went after my kids. And then the guy who's interviewing, it's like after his kids and his wife, he's like, wait, I thought the mob didn't do that. It's like, oh please. He's like like they would have fucking chopped him up. They don't. It's like, I thought they had a code of honor. No, there's no fucking honor. Like these guys are fucking killers. They don't give a fuck. They would have killed my family. And like that whole bullshit that they don't go after families, that's just what they say so that so that you don't stop glorifying them. Because that's what he said. They all glorified. How people glorify after like watching The Godfather, and in reality, that's not at all how they were. They weren't sweet guys. They weren't fucking. They didn't. They as far as the code went, and when you watch this documentary where. I believe Rudy Giuliani, who says they you open up. I believe he said it was his grandparents who opened a barbershop.
Yeah, no, I was going to talk about Rudy when we got to was it episode 5 when he shows up?
Episode 3, 2.
I thought it was like later in the.
There's only 3 episodes.
Like near the end when he pops up, but
Each episode is pretty long. It's only 3 episodes.
So it's like episode 3. I thought is when he showed up.
No, he shows up in episode 2 because he goes away after a while. They bring in the guy who bugged them for episode 2. But yeah, episode 2 is when they bring him in towards like the middle, where he had his crew of lawyers who were like superstar lawyers. But anyways, back to he mentioned how they, I believe his grandparents, they opened up a barbershop, and as soon as it was something they sacrificed to open, and as soon as they made a little money, then the mob came in, and you got to pay us, like you mentioned earlier, you got to pay us that tax, the extortion fee. And that is, that still happens today. You go to LA, like I said, we talked about, there's little vendors that have to pay up, whatever gang runs in that neighborhood, the 18th Street, the MS-13s, or whoever. And that to me that's fucked up, because the government already fucks us over with taxes.
And it's like, especially if the gangs are like young teens, it's like, come on, y'all, look, my tax money's already going to your local high school. How about you go there and get your free lunch that I paid for already? Granted, the free lunch is terrible, and we kind of need to make some improvements there. That's neither here nor there. Go over there. But no, really, Rudy Giuliani, when he talks about it, he's referring. He doesn't just talk about his grandparents. He's talking about. He's like, yo, this happened to every business. Every business is getting got. And you know something? When I saw that, and I saw how like obviously angry and kind of hurt, I'd imagine, that he was by that, and frustrated. Like, they're doing this to your grandparents, and you see this as a kid. I realized right then and there, I was like, that's why you're a Republican. No wonder you hate taxes, because you grew up watching the gangsters force your innocent grandparents to basically line their pockets for no good reason. They stole. So I get you now. So I look at Rudy a little bit. It's like when you look into a supervillain's origin and you're like, why do you believe this, Magneto? Why are you willing to go up to the Statue of Liberty and blow a thing up, even though it could potentially kill a lot of innocent people? And then you go, oh, it's because he was a survivor of a Nazi camp, and he feels a certain type of way, as people used to say about humanity because of this. So it's like, oh, I get it.
Explain it again.
Huh?
Explain it again. What made sense about him being a Republican?
Republicans.
I don't know if
Republicans hate taxes, even though, we need, we need taxes to fund our schools and roads, and if we were a more sensible country, our health care. But Republicans are like, no, we don't want, no taxes, no. Schools just gonna have to figure it out. No taxes. So for him to talk about the mob story and what they did to his folks, and basically taking from their business, taking from their mouths, I was like, oh, that's why you're a Republican. It's your whole supervillain origin story. You just made yourself sympathetic. I get it. You're like, never again. It's one of those overreaction kind of situations where it's like, hey, Rudy, I was thinking maybe we could divert some of the funds to help out an orphanage or something through the state. And he's like, no taxes. The mob did it to my family, and never again. But it's to help out orphan. No taxes. Supervillain origin. There we go.
Yeah, because he from what I've read, and look at him now. Like, he turned into a villain in a way.
Exactly. Magneto.
Of course. Yeah.
Killmonger. There we go.
After not as cool as New Killmonger, but yeah. When he was,
not as cool.
In what was that?
I said not as cool. I was agreeing.
Yeah, there was a lot of New Yorkers. I don't know. I'm not, but a lot of New Yorkers that I've talked to saying after Giuliani, like New York changed in a really bad way. Like it because of him. There's a lot of things that changed that weren't good for the city. I don't know if the stop and frisk thing started with him. Do you remember that?
He was
that
certainly
Bloomberg?
a proponent of it, but I don't know if he was the one that initiated it.
Bloomberg was the one, but I think it kind of started with him, yes, and which is super racist. I don't know if you guys are familiar with what that is. The listener, but the stop and frisk is usually it mostly targets like black and brown people.
I think that
where if you look
on paper, it's supposed to be anyone that looks suspicious, but in practice, it turns into we're only going to stop and frisk black and brown folk. And I'm like, what about Timmy over there? Yeah, Timmy has blonde hair. We trust him.
Or wise guy.
But I saw something shiny in his waistband. Nope. Sorry, L. Hector. We're focusing on you today, buddy. Meanwhile, Timmy's going off to rob a bank 5 seconds from now.
Right. He's going to do a hit for the mob.
Are you guys able to hear me?
Fucking right. So, okay. So the film, Gaspar, are you still there?
I was wondering if you guys are able to hear me.
Gaspar? Anyways.
Yeah, I haven't heard Gaspar in a minute. Usually he's piped in by now. I hope he's okay.
I think he watched this. I think that's why he's been.
Well, okay those fires are popping off everywhere. Okay. Maybe the smoke got to him.
I think he just got disconnected, but he can hear us. We can't hear him.
He says he's okay though. That's the important thing. So, you okay?
He's okay. Yeah, especially with these fires. Check on your friends, people. What I also wanted to talk about is the stuff and talking about the power that the mob had over New York, which was, like we said, it spread from all over. From they didn't really talk about gambling as much as they talked about construction, but I think construction was probably the biggest money making thing for them because they really didn't have to work.
Oh yeah,
you just gotta threaten a couple of people, like you said. You were just gotta. The work is done by itself. That's like the most profitable way of being involved with something. Like you literally have to do nothing but kill a guy or two, which I mean that's a lot, but then then you could go off and do what a lot of these guys were doing. They're soldiers, which is the heists, and controlling the ports. Essentially, what they talk about, like they controlled all these unions. Like if you control the unions, you control the work itself. And when they talk about they control longshoremen, I mean, if you control the longshoremen, you control the ports of New York. That's a tremendous amount of influence over the city. Like, oh bitch, you want these whatever's coming from China, you got to go through me. That's a lot of fucking power, dude.
What I always found interesting about, like, a quick sidebar.
Yeah.
My friend Isaac had said he found Batman the Dark Knight to be, he loved.
Sorry?
Can you guys hear me now?
I can hear you now. I think we just lost Joaquin. He was in the middle of a thought, but we lost him. Can you hear me, Gaspar?
I can, yeah.
Okay. No, so what I was getting into was we were talking about the film and how. So you what did you like? I haven't really heard from you. What did you think about some of the stuff that was said that was probably new to you?
When Gotti kills the boss, that was different in the movie, right?
No, not necessarily. I mean, it is different in a way. I don't think they really talk. Well, so I don't think in the movie, in the Gotti film that we just watched, I don't think they talked about how the two big bosses were being indicted. Because I think that had a big part in killing him. Like, this dude's being questioned, and he's got a lot of attention. So let's just. It kind of was like, okay, he knows that I'm dealing drugs, so he's gonna want to kill me. And also, he's got the magnifying glass on a secret society, essentially.
Yeah.
So I think that was also one of the reasons why, like, let's just fucking get rid of him, because it's gonna bring in heat to us, and it's also gonna get him killed. If Big Paul would have went to jail like they wanted him to, which that's one of the things I didn't like about the feds talking about how they were disappointed that he had to die like that, because it's like they wanted to get him. It's just like
it was a bit sadistic, I thought. Just
I thought too.
Yeah.
Explain the scene. What exactly the premise to that?
Which scene?
Well, the whole thing about why it's sadistic, so that people know.
Yeah, okay, because like, we're going through an era where we're questioning the legitimacy of law enforcement, and so right. I couldn't help but be thinking the whole time, it's like the mob is not the only enterprise that operates in this way, right? That extorts poor people. That it was built like a business. What else is built like businesses? Corporations, and they extort poor people. They pretty much get whatever they want. They have politicians in their pockets, things like that. And so, but they're on the correct side of the law, right? Whereas according to them, right. And so watching these guys, and one of them was talking. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the guys is talking about how he listened to one of the bosses speak for, I think, 600 hours for like 4 to 5 years, and it's like he's like, you get really close to them, and so I don't know. I could sympathize with that. Where if you listen to somebody for that long, you're gonna get really close to somebody, but you're still gonna put them away. And it's like, and then they're like, it's too bad that he killed himself because we didn't get closure to our case. It's like, what the hell?
Yeah,
it speaks to justice versus like murder, because the dude didn't kill himself, he got murdered. And the thing is like, he felt like, I didn't want the guy to get killed. Like, I wanted him to go to jail and do what he felt was justice served, because sometimes
yes, I agree to a certain extent, but also to what the lawyer that was defending, you remember they interviewed, this is what I love, they interviewed the lawyer who was defending Fat Tony Salerno, and he said, just because they're the government doesn't mean they're going to play fair. They want to win, essentially. And I felt that's kind of exactly what he like, I didn't. Oh, you guys still there? Did we lose everybody?
No, I'm back.
Can you guys hear me? Okay.
I can hear you.
Where do we leave off?
Last thing I heard was he was talking about how, like, the officer was like, I didn't win. Like, I really wanted to win, and someone got him before I did.
Yeah.
Which wasn't how I interpreted it, but yeah.
I mean, like, I see what your point was, though. Like, he didn't want him to die. Yes.
But
it didn't
seem like it was out of remorse.
Distinct.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
It didn't seem like it was out of remorse. It was like, I wish he hadn't died so that I could have gotten closure over the case.
Yeah, that's how I saw
Well,
it
I
too.
mean, look at it this way. When you work in law enforcement like that, you're trained up and you really do believe that, you know, justice isn't just like a label, it's a way of life, and it's a balance of morality. Like, you know, people always say, well, there's a difference between vengeance and justice, right? Like, you know, like, yeah, this person killed my dad, so I'm going to go kill them. It's like, no, that isn't justice, though. Justice, that's revenge. Justice is having this person tried in front of a court of their peers. Like, we have this system, supposedly. It's not, it's not a perfect system, and it's never really been built for everybody. But the idea, under the idea that it has been built for everybody, and if you believe that it's been built for everybody, like some law enforcement officials, you get the sense of like it isn't fair or morally correct for someone to get murdered rather than have that person stand trial, because they owe a debt to society, and they also have the right to stand trial in front of their peers, because their peers could easily also find them not guilty. You know what I
but
mean?
their
You
peers could
take that
also.
away from somebody when you put a bullet through their head. You know what I mean?
I would agree with you if there was no such thing as a death penalty, because again, okay, that's something that could happen also. They could get, the death sentence. So,
But even then, it should be decided by, you know, like a judge and jury. Like, you know, ideally an impartial judge and jury, which is hard because people are biased. But you know what I'm saying? Versus like, hey, he just got capped. You don't know how his trial could have turned out. You know? I mean, he deserved to have some kind of punishment. He was a mobster. He's a terrible person. But, he still, in my opinion, deserved justice. Like,
yeah, I can see that. I mean, I think more importantly, especially, okay, I don't want to sound barbaric, but like, there's certain guys where I thought like, damn, I support the death penalty for him, or guys like Ted Bundy or whatever,
right.
But also, like, I see your point, because I believe in the importance of due process for whenever an innocent person is being tried for something they didn't do. And, that happens a lot.
It does.
Like in Michael Francis, I don't know if you've heard his interviews, but like, he said they were getting him for stuff he didn't do, or his father. They're getting him for stuff he didn't do. And it's like, that's where the due process comes in. Like, oh yeah, he's a mobster. He's not he did bad things, but they're trying to get you for something that he didn't do, and that's when the due process is really important.
Exactly. It's basically like they fingered him for 5 murders, but he only did 3 of them. It's like,
Right.
I didn't kill those 2. I didn't kill those twins. That was my brother Larry. I didn't do that.
And this kind of ties into the whole RICO law, which they talked about and explained it very well in the film. I was not aware about the RICO law.
Well, I didn't understand what is the RICO law.
Okay. Did you go ahead? Go ahead.
Oh, it's a law that allows you to charge an entire group of people as an organized conspiracy to commit crime. Before the RICO law, this is one of the reasons why it was so hard to take down the mob, is that the mob was so insulated back in the day. You would arrest like a soldier, someone on the streets. The guy wouldn't flip, the guy wouldn't snitch, and then you had no choice but now maybe that guy, one of the thousands of people they have working the front lines, goes to jail, does some time if you really have something on him. But that's no problem, because they'll just pick up another guy, train another new dude to take that guy's place.
It was usually just soldiers, right?
It was one of those.
And then they did like 1 or 2 years. So the RICO law,
1 or 2 years.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
But RICO comes in and says, how can we get the guys at the top? Because, we're just getting these dudes for their individual problems, and the dudes at the top aren't running around getting their hands dirty, right? They're just putting out the orders and they're holding discussions and conversations. How do we do this? So RICO law says, hey, check this out. If you can prove that more than one person is operating in consort with each other to plan these criminal acts and even benefit off of them knowingly, then we can charge them as an organization now. And then we can arrest everybody.
And
all
everybody,
5 heads of the whole commission can get arrested.
and you can charge.
We just have to gather the evidence.
Right. You can charge Castellano for the murders that his soldiers did when he probably didn't lift a finger, you know? So that's how they're getting a lot of the MS-13 guys now. That's how on the flip side, from what I've also heard, which is kind of scary, is where if you are in any way associated, not in criminal activities, but just in any way associated with someone really involved in like any kind of criminal activity, they can then use a RICO law on you, which it sucks. Like if you don't know your friend is involved with like cartel.
But I think they're only doing that because it's sort of like, you know, I think if they do end up nabbing you, it's because they think that maybe you are involved in something, but they don't know. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like their aim isn't to get innocent people, but their assumption is if you know the guy, you're probably maybe 9 times out of 10 somehow involved in the gang. And that's just one of those things where they're removed from, you know, these officers are so far removed from, you know, street, you know, it's just that's just one of those just in case things, though, I think, to make it easier to get people who are actually involved in the gang. I don't think they're actually trying to nab innocent people who just, you know what I mean? They're just trying to make the law easier to like nab someone who's like, we know you in it. We just can't quite prove it, but we know you in it. You know, it's one of those things. Like,
also
how can we?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. Take it.
It also makes it easy for someone like Sammy the Bull Gravano to see, and that's exactly what happened, to see that he's getting whatever 70 years, and he's like, yeah, no, it was him.
I'll take 20.
Exactly, yeah, I'll take whatever he did, like 10, and I'll tell you everything John Gotti was involved with. I don't want any part of this. And that's what happened with the RICO laws is a lot of these mob guys started snitching on each other. You know, snitches get stitches. But yeah, that's also what the RICO thing helped. And now it's being used for, even it's RICO is also, they're pushing, I don't know if you guys know this, but some people are pushing for the RICO law to be used against certain police departments that are involved with like shady shit.
And fucking politicians too.
Dope.
Was that?
Politicians too. Like right now when those politicians got caught investing in or pulling out their investments right before COVID, right before the stock market crashed.
Yeah.
You remember that? I think
Bill Gates would be fucked.
Well, one person I think ended up getting in trouble, which it's just a scapegoat. Whoever else was involved in that is fine.
And going to what I just said too about the police is and also with politicians that you mentioned in the interview that I just saw that I sent you guys with Sammy the Bull Gravano, the most recent interview he did. He says he wants, because it happened to him, he wants to see some of these politicians that are corrupt to be tried with the RICO, which but he said it's also only
easier said than done, but yeah.
He said it's mostly being used on black and brown.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like Tekashi that they got RICO too. That's why he ended up flipping on, even though he was like kind of the ringleader in a way.
That was one of the hard things about watching this.
He was their mascot. He was that Blood Gang's mascot. He wasn't no ringleader. They were using him. They were essentially using him to pump money out of him, and he started to believe his own hype, forgetting that he never was actually a gangster, from what I understand. And then he got caught up.
What I mean by leader,
he wasn't built for it. He got caught up.
Can you guys hear me?
What I mean by leader was like he was the one fronting the money for some of the shit that they got caught for. Yeah, we can hear you, Gaspar. Yeah, Gaspar, we can hear you. Okay, so another interesting thing that I really loved about this, which we talked about a little bit, but we haven't gotten into it, was the whole thing about hearing the FBI agent's story on how they planted these bugs. There's a lot of things I took away from that, but I want to hear you guys, your guys' thoughts on that.
Oh my gosh. Gaspar, how about you go first?
Yes. I don't think he's here.
Okay, so I'll go then.
Okay.
All right. So my hat's off to the balls that
Yeah.
these men had to put on cable television disguises
Fuck.
and to put on like, phone company disguises and then walk into these. I mean, what would have happened if, because, the same dude went to more than one house working more than one job.
Yes.
So what happens if you go to one mafioso's house and you're dressed up as like the phone guy, and then you go to the other mafioso's house and dressed up as the cable guy, but the other dude from the first house that you visited just so happens to be visiting the other guy's house? Hey, don't I know you? Don't you also work for the phone company? What, switching jobs? Yeah, that's a...
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
That didn't cross my mind, but
No,
yes,
well,
that would.
They said he said it later. It's like if we made a mistake, we were gonna get killed.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Especially because the guy is in that scene where he's talking about, he's one of the people that would listen in on these conversations, and he knew when they door, just so the listeners, Gaspar, or any one of you guys, you do it better.
Yeah.
Which scene?
The scene we're talking about where the talk about when they're planting the bugs, like that was one of the biggest things I loved. So the scene starts off with, well, this is the one I'm talking about in particular, when because they bugged, the first one they bugged was Ange, because he was a loudmouth. We call him Quack Quack. He was a loudmouth, and what's funny is there's a lot of guys that I grew up with that were involved with gangs, and they were loud about it. Like they would share too much. And I remember thinking, if I ever was a part of a criminal organization, I don't want any in my what was it? Ruggiero. He was the first one to get bugged, and it was easy because he was such a fucking loudmouth that he would just
talk too much.
It's crazy to think. Okay, for me, as I saw in the 80s, and how sophisticated their bugging technology was back then. Now, I mean, what was it, like 40, 50 years later?
Well, now you don't need to
look at where we are with technology now and how much better this shit is.
You just need to hack into Facebook now.
Can you guys hear me?
You just need to hack into people's Facebooks now. I said you just need to hack into people's Facebooks now.
Exactly. You or they carry around a bugging device in their phone, in their pocket, 24/7. I mean, we're doing it. We're talking into it right now. It's just crazy. So
can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you. I thought, the fucking balls in these guys to go and do this to guys who will without a doubt kill you if they fucking found you in their car. The scene where the scene is this FBI agent. He goes into the mob boss Paul Castellano's house, disguised as, what was he disguised as? A cable guy?
Yeah.
He as a cable guy to fix an interruption that they created themselves. That is
so brilliant.
Is fucking brilliant. Yes. And he had the funny thing to me was he actually had Paul Castellano's like right hand man, his main enforcer, his hitman,
Who's hovering
help
over him.
He had him help him hold the light while he
Yeah, what
planted
the
the
hell?
bug inside of the cable box. What an idiot! This is a different time, but it's like, what the
Well, you're pretty sure that like the guy has no idea what a bug looks like. This is supposedly
Right.
relatively secret tech. So
Yes.
he's thinking he's fixing the cable. So he's like, if you hold the light for me, I'll be out of here real quick. I just need this one favor. So you get the guy on your side. Honestly, it may be
To
funny.
a guy who only knows killing.
It may be funny in the documentary because it's like hindsight and stuff. But if this were a movie, like set during this time period, and you had like built up the fact that the dude that's about to hand you the flashlight or hold the flashlight up for you is the most murderous, like tough street gangster in the world, and we've established that in this film already because he just got through butchering someone. And then like you're planning a bug, that'd be an incredibly intense scene. That scene would make Alfred Hitchcock uncomfortable.
Yes, because I feel uncomfortable watching him talk about it. Like, holy shit! Because that guy was one of the guys that died with Paul Castellano when they were assassinated. So it was like, and he had fucking killed a lot of people. So I had already heard about him in a different documentary, and just to imagine yourself, because I have worked as a cable guy before. And there were some customers that give me the vibes, and it's kind of uncomfortable working in their house. So I can just imagine
Did they hover over you?
A lot of them sometimes did, yes. But not in a, like, I'm a killer way, more of a I'm lonely, please don't leave way. And I can just imagine how seeing a scene like that on film, like that deserves either a fucking Scorsese or Coen Brothers fucking like their interpretation, like that in itself is a movie scene, like you said, that could be used. Also, the scene where they planted the bug on what's his name, Tony Ducks, the Lucchese crime boss. They planted a bug on his car.
Oh
that
man,
was fucking Jesus.
Oh dude, that scene where they're taking him in, he's like, "Wait, you bugged my car."
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well,
and that awkward silence that follows, like, yeah, sure it did.
That's the thing about, like, that's scary about. Okay, I mean, it's scary for the criminals, but it also is a little like unsettling watching it as a civilian. It's like they figured out what car he has. Okay, he has, what was it, a Lincoln or a fucking I forgot what kind of car.
I think it was
Jaguar,
Lincoln.
Yeah, a Jaguar. It was a Jaguar, and they got a exact same model as his car, and then they spent hours like trying to find the fastest way to plant that bug. It's like just the amount of
not just the fastest way, but they also test ran it to make sure that it wouldn't make any noise. It wasn't noticeable.
Yeah, that you didn't get the road noise or anything like that.
So then they discovered it was like right behind the heater is where it made the least noise.
And also, what's funny about that scene is, you guys have seen Donnie Brasco, right?
Yeah.
Remember when Al Pacino's character is looking for the bug, he looks for that spot, and it's based on a real story. So I'm assuming this probably happened after. It's like, yeah. So going back to, it's funny because they talk about this in the Donnie Brasco film. The boss gets whacked. Remember, they're looking at the newspaper. The boss gets whacked. The guy with the cigar, Carmine Galante, and then the documentary. That was one of the things that they all got arrested for, because they all had to agree on killing the boss. And that guy Carmine Galante was killed. They call him the cigar. I don't know if you remember how he died. He died with his head in his cigar in his mouth.
Like a
he's
boss.
The guy. Yes. He's the guy who they also assassinate in the Donnie Brasco. what I find interesting about this is, I think Joaquin talked about how compared this to like how a corporation or government has influence, how they work similar. I saw that as the Gambinos, for example, because they helped that kid to assassinate. I don't know if you guys remember this scene, but after he assassinated Carmine Galante, he went to go hang out with the Gambinos, celebrate with the Gambinos, and that's something that these mobs did with one another. They, you know, they would go and get, one of the soldiers would go and get the approval from the other bosses. It's really like shady because it's like, okay, I'm a leader of one of the families, and Joaquin's a leader of one of the families, and Gaspar's a leader of one of the families, and we all have this meeting together, and like, cool, yeah, we're gonna go 53 ways on this racket, and we're gonna get rid of this guy. Like, all right, cool. And then I leave the meeting, and then I see one of my guys going into the meeting with you two. I was like, oh no. And then all of a sudden I'm chowing down on some tacos, and then like my fucking, they blow my chest open.
Right mid taco.
Yeah, dude, that is kind of what the U.S. does to fucking governments in South America. They go and like, you know what? We're gonna fund you, and you're gonna take over the government, and you're the boss now. All right, buddy? Like, all right. And that's just like, it's a human thing, dude. I don't know, like what.
No, that was something that kind of I started to think about, and I was really young. I was like in my early teenage years, where I was like, okay, because you have this fantasy that out in the streets it's like Wild Wild West, and whoever's the biggest gets to make the shots, and for some reason, outside of the streets, like in the corporate world or whatever, like it's not like that, right? Everything's fair. There's laws, whatever. Right.
Bullshit.
It was for me. It was actually during 9/11 when I started to kind of have that awakening, and the more information you come across, the more that seems to be true.
Right, with like Halliburton and the whole Iraq war, like that. That's
the other thing that was scary about watching how these FBI agents were, putting mics into the mafia guys, is that like, we know that they do surveillance on like activists. You have there's been a handful of whistleblowers recently that get like arrested, right, or they get in trouble.
Yeah.
Well, like Edward Snowden, for example, dude.
Well,
Edward Snowden.
Edward Snowden is I appreciate what he did, but what he did also merited legal action. He was working for the NSA, a spy organization, and anyone who's ever read anything about the CIA or the NSA or even fictional spy organizations knows that one of the cardinal rules is you don't leak information about what you're doing to anyone. So, like, yes, what he did was patriotic, but the U.S. government trying to like bring him back to be punished also makes sense because he did break one of the rules. It's technically treason, but spiritually not, if that makes any sense. Like the law book says it's treason, but in another sense it was patriotic, depending on like who you ask.
Does that also apply to
I think it's true patriotism what he did, man.
Agreed.
And I think he should be
does what you're saying?
I agree with you.
I think he should be pardoned, but I wouldn't let him work. Here's the thing, like on a personal level, it's like, all right, I can't trust you. Like it's kind of like okay, if I collected strands of hair from every woman I made love with, and I kept them in the box, and then like one day he found it, like, hey, what is this? Like, that's my thing, man. Just shut up.
My other thing too.
And then you went and told the whole world, like, you know what? People deserve to know that I'm weird like that, but I'm not gonna be your friend.
Well, the other thing too to consider here is that he gave the implication is that he also gave U.S. secrets to other countries.
That's where I don't
that
agree
makes
with.
him less cool.
So-
like, did you just tell us
But-
about the program where they're watching us just so you could be you turned into a hero while you also sold secrets? Or did you only sell secrets because you knew we were coming after you? It's one of those things. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Because Russia didn't just give him a place to stay out of the kindness of their heart. He had to have traded something important.
Right, you did. Yeah, you needed to come with
Something that we don't know. You know what I mean?
But
So
you're saying that shit was not cool. Yes, I agree.
wait a minute.
But
Wait, those Russian bots when they hacked Facebook and it was Snowden.
Yep.
Snowden must have given them the tech and the know-how, and that's how we got Trump in office. Snowden's to blame. It all makes sense.
It all makes sense. But here's the thing. I don't know. Like it's easy to say that and then put yourself in this position. Like, would you fucking be willing to take life in prison or bullets in your chest? Or fucking, I don't know. It's hard.
The other thing is like it. I'm surprised that the Russians didn't take the information from him, then throw a paper bag over his head and send it back to the U.S. with some sort of cheeky note on it.
Oh, I think that's probably a very likely thing to happen.
But they haven't done it yet, you know. Like,
yeah, I don't think he's done running. To be honest, I don't think he's done. I don't think you're gonna find out he's in like fucking North Korea next or fucking Iran. And I think
you think maybe he's just like leaking information to the Russians out slowly. Like they're coming to his room and they're like, all right, Snowden, where is the rest of the rest of computer virus program that you engineered? And he goes, if to F4, then 7. And they're like, okay. Is that it? No. I'm having a hard time remembering the rest of it. But that's like 1/1,000,000th of the code. Come back tomorrow and I'll give you some more.
You know what he's like? He's like Martin Lawrence in Blue Streak. He's like, what do you think about what was it? What about P27? P31. 31 flavors. I'll show you. Like he's just coming up with shit off the top of his head. He's just coming up with. Have you seen that movie, Blue Streak?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I picture him in Russia. Like
coming up with stuff to keep him. Snowden, Russia, if you're listening, Snowden, I'm sorry if I blew your cover. My bad, man. Russia, if you're listening, we're just kidding. Whatever he's giving you is real.
Hope you guys still listen to our podcast.
I know we don't have any listeners in Russia, but
to our knowledge. Can't tell me them KGB folks aren't hacking our systems, trying to tell like, all right, are they supporting our brother Trump, or are they with Biden? You must know. Listen.
I think the FBI would be more worried about us than KGB.
I mean, yeah, if we were not saying stuff that's on Netflix, I guess. But going back to I just pictured him.
Hey, you know what I also dug about the law enforcement?
I picture him in a meeting with a bunch of Kremlin guys and KGB guys, and he's got like charts of Bigfoot sightings.
Oh my gosh!
It's kind of like bullshitting the hell out of them. Sorry about that.
So check it. Another thing that I liked, was the fact that the guy over the years, as he was listening to the mobster conversations through phone or whatever, he was also like sending the guy birthday cards and
Paul Castellano. Yes,
just messing with him.
That's like the friendship finisher in Mortal Kombat.
Warfare, no? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Friendship finisher in Mortal Kombat. Friendship. No, you're absolutely right.
Isn't that like? Wasn't he trying to do like a form of psychological warfare on him though?
Yeah.
Fuck with him. Yeah, because at first I thought, oh, how sweet, but then I was like, no, that's that's got to be creepy. No matter how scary you are as a guy, like you can be the scariest motherfucker, but someone sends you flowers every birthday, like, no, send those away. I don't want anything to do with that.
Well, they knew.
But you know what?
They knew that the cops were onto them, right? There was one scene where one of the mobsters like, "Should I kill him?" And then the guy's like, "No, they were just doing their job."
Yeah, that was Paco Solano, because I guess that guy you're talking about was like having conversations with his mistress who he lived with.
All right.
And yeah, and he literally was listening to that conversation live, and he was should we kill him? And he's just waiting for the verdict, like yeah, no, it's not. Another thing that I found interesting was what's his name?
He's like, let's not kill him. He's just doing his job.
Yeah, that was
how
like,
very understanding.
What a sweetheart. Another thing that I found interesting was when Michael Francis, who was like one of the only mobsters who was a captain that they interviewed, that they have. And again, to the listeners, just like I said before in the Gotti review, that Michael Francis' stories are fucking interesting, and he's available on like a bunch of YouTube interviews, and he was in this film as one of the mob guys who actually speaks out. And what he was doing was like, I guess, one of the most genius. I believe he was like, so in one of the years, I forget what year it was, on the Forbes did a list of the most successful criminals. And I believe John Gotti was like high in the list, and it was nothing but like actual bosses, you know, not like, you know, whatever, like actual bosses, like the actual boss of the family who were on that list. And Gotti was on the list, and right below him was Michael Francis, who was just a captain, which is like really low in the ranks compared to the other guys. And what he was doing was he was doing this thing which I don't understand yet 100%. I don't know if you guys remember what it was, but he was collecting the tax money on gasoline. So essentially what he was doing was, you know, he was selling gasoline to gas stations, and whatever they paid in tax, he kept the amount that they paid in tax and didn't pay the government. So he was just keeping the tax money. So whatever you pay, what is it, like $1 back then, like $1.90 on a gallon, and it's like whatever, 65 cents on tax. He collected those 65 cents, whatever, and he just kept that. He didn't pay the government. So I mean, you think about how much gasoline costs, and how much people bought gasoline. He was making, I believe he said, 10 million a week or 10 million a month. His first payout was like 200,000 for like the first week. Eventually he started doing it, and he actually was one of the many, I believe he was one of the first guys in the mob to work with the Russian mob. So he was working with the Russians, and I don't know if you guys remember this, when the FBI guys came to him. It's like, we know what you're doing, but we don't know how you're doing it. So if you let us know, we'll give you an out. Like, yeah, fucking no, yeah.
Yeah, for real. It's like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's what he said. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that according to him, and I think that's like the one racket where it's like the most clean, where you don't really have to kill people. But I just to add to that, I just heard another interview with him that he did, because he does interviews for almost anybody, it seems. Which, goddamn, it would be great to have him on, because I think he really is.
Guess we got to send him an email,
dude. It seems like he will do an interview for anybody. He was on this guy's podcast, who was like not a very well known podcast, and I heard it today actually, where he talked about he still knows. He knows he would be able to do that still today, because it's a really smart scheme where you can go undetected. And he says the only reason he got caught up was because he was getting, they were using RICO on something else, and his partner in that racket testified against him. So it's like he says he, to this day, like today, if he wanted to fuck up his life that he has now, which is, according to him, he would be risking his family and all that, being locked up again. But if he wanted to, he could still do it. He just, it's not worth, the implications are, not worth what he has now. And shit, it's like, tell me how to do it, motherfucker.
Right.
For real. But I like, let's see, we touched on the weird cards being sent in. We touched on like the most interesting bits with the, what it was like to actually go in there and plant a bug. Like, we had the guy who entered into that restaurant, right, and actually kind of like was on a date and was trying to look for like the best place to bug it,
Yeah.
The scene with the dog was pretty suspenseful too.
Oh yeah, that fucking. What did they do? They actually shocked the dog.
I forgot what they did to pacify that dog.
I can't hear you guys.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, I grabbed onto the boot, but then I don't remember what happened after that.
What the hell?
But the real historical landmark was what happened with the court case. You got 3 guys in their 30s, pretty young to be handling a case that size.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know if you know this, but it takes a long time to become a lawyer.
Right.
Not quite as long as a doctor, but it takes a minute. And then like even longer to build yourself up to the point where you can get to try a case like that.
Right.
So, but it seemed like they had a lot writing.
Some people that are part of an organization that's been existing since like the early 1900s.
And there's never been a conviction like this before.
No.
First time in history.
No.
And, up until that point, those mobsters, those aging dudes, their lawyers come in there and be like, look, Mr. Bonanno has tomatoes in his backyard. He'll keel over and die if you stick him in jail right now. Look, he's just a honest, retired, elderly Italian American. Just leave him be. Those tapes, boy.
Yeah. Fucking speaking of that fucking Bonanno guy, I think he's one of those who got to live exactly like you said. He got to live out the rest of his days in some house in like Arizona planting tomatoes.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So when you study like the medieval period, like you have a lot of information about like how people were tortured, right? I think you can have it written down or on pictures or something like that, or on paintings, and then a lot of those devices that have been able to survive. Like, I think that in 1,000 years, when somebody studies us, like, if you find a piece, somebody who got put into cement and then buried somewhere, like, those things are going to be found. And people are going to be like, man, the 2000s, like, people got tortured a lot. Right?
Or like they find all the guns that they threw in the water.
Well, there are also the photographs that all these FBI agents took, plus the recordings, like, or the transcripts of the recordings. Like, that stuff is going to survive.
Yep.
And it's funny that you said that, because like, for example, the tapes, like, I would love just for inspiration or whatever, for fucking pure entertainment, I would like to hear some of those tapes.
Well, I guess they're probably public domain, right? If Netflix was able to do.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, okay, they made a documentary, but damn, you could probably write a whole script.
Yeah.
Of all the shit that they're just based on the conversations. Like, I mean, that's what they did with the movie.
Agreed.
The movie Gotti. I mean, Armand Desante fucking studied the fuck out of those tapes, because he pulled it off. Like I said, the whole Gotti voice and the way he talked, like, to the fucking. Do you remember that recording they had where it says, "I'll sever your motherfucking head"? Mm-hmm. That was a recording of John Gotti giving out an order, and that fucking voice was exactly how this motherfucker portrayed it. So I'm just saying, like, on a fucking, as an entertainer or whatever, or someone that wants to be in film, that would be an interesting thing to go and look at and listen to all these tapes. Because, yeah, I mean, it's different now where we can literally go and watch those cartel videos where they have, it's similar, but it's different. This is like when they're relaxed in their home, but they're talking about doing some evil shit. Like, yeah, that's stuff that like it's gonna be in the ether forever. Mm-hmm. It's like, what do we do with it?
Crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. Another thing that I liked that they didn't really talk about a lot was, for example, the I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Guardian Angels, group. They talked.
Oh yeah, they touched on that for like 5 seconds.
Which that in itself is an interesting thing. I don't know if I told you guys. I actually tried to sign up to be a Guardian Angel a few years ago. Didn't go through.
They have a chapter in the Bay?
They have a chapter in Sacramento that covers the whole Bay and like most of California.
Wow.
Yeah. I was considering it a few years ago because of something that happened to me. But I don't know. I also believe in like sometimes you're asking for shit, So I just figured I don't know. I mean, I would put myself in danger if it was like in the moment, like something I'm witnessing, if like someone needs help. But to be out there just like a fucking unarmed, I mean, I appreciate what they do, but I don't know if I would do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that either.
They're kind of like they kind of sound like they're real. Are you familiar with the RLS movement, the real life superheroes?
No. I think I've heard of it. It's kind of like the Kick-Ass group, right? Remember?
They kind of inspired Kick-Ass, yeah. Like RLS, basically, they back in the mid 2000s, I want to say, like maybe early 2010s. No, like mid 2000s. There's this movement that came up where you had individuals across the country who started creating their own costumes and going out and patrolling their neighborhoods and like not necessarily beating up criminals because none of them were trained like that. Well, except for one dude. There was one dude who's like ex-military, like a Marine or something, and he wore like camo pants and a t-shirt with his logo on it, but he wasn't like a masked vigilante. But I can't remember what his superhero name was. But he also had a radio where he would contact the police and let them know what was going on, and but he could definitely defend himself.
Right.
But some of the more colorful ones, like out in San Francisco, I think there was a dude named Motormouth. Out in like Pantaluma somewhere, there was a dude named The Ring or The Eye, and he had like he was dressed like the Question with a fedora and a like trench coat. Anyway, like that's kind of what the Guardian Angels sound like to me. It's just a group of like regular people, non-law enforcement, non-professionals, going out there trying to make a difference in the best way they understand.
I think, the Guardian Angels though, from what I remember when I was looking at some of their, I guess, I mean, not requirements, but something they prefer you had. It's like they wanted you to have some form of like martial arts or boxing experience, and here's another thing that I read because I was reading their newsletters, and there was a couple of like I guess one of them in particular, and I forgot what part of the U.S. It was like not in California, obviously, but he was gunned down because he got involved with like an altercation in some train, and then those guys later on saw him out in the streets and they gunned him down. It was like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's what I'm kind of like. I don't know if I want to get involved like that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. We're getting close to the end. This was only 3 episodes, and this was still season 1. overall, man, it's a really
Before we run out of time, I just wanted to say a couple other things I really liked about it that have nothing to do with Mafia. I really like the photography, the pictures that the FBI agents were taking.
Oh yeah,
because it was kind of a snapshot of the era, right?
Right.
Yep.
The other thing that I really like, I'm a huge fan of like cars, and so I love seeing all these like '80s cars, all these boxy cars that you don't really see that. I go to car shows a lot, and usually when I go to car shows, it's mostly like muscle cars.
Yeah.
But yeah, these cars were like all boxy from mid '70s to the mid '80s, so it was nice seeing them.
Yeah, I like that too. When it's like a time capsule in a way.
Yeah.
And then seeing those pictures of old New York, old.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I always appreciate that. That's one of the reasons I like Godfather 2, because they were like the Godfather 2, the scenes when they're filming the stuff with Robert De Niro. They shot that in like old New York back in the 70s when New York was old New York, and they really were able to transform it into like 1900s New York, because a lot of the architecture was still the same. So yeah, I agree, man. That's I always like that, and seeing how they're dressed and stuff.
Yeah,
I like that too. Yeah, just before we run out of time, guys, I want to say I definitely recommend this documentary, even if you're not into like mob stuff. There's some stuff. I mean, if you don't like listening about people, planning murders, and you don't want to see dead bodies, definitely don't watch this, because they show a lot of dead bodies, and you hear a lot of people talking about they're going to commit murder. So overall, for me, because I like crime stuff, I give this a 9 out of 10, man. This is really good. I'm excited for season 2. Go ahead. One of you guys?
I found no fault with the movie. I give it honestly a 10 out of 10. I thought the docuseries was superbly executed and well done. Great snapshot of history.
I'll do the same. 10 out of 10 for me too. Fuck it. I don't know why I was hoping that.